No, my experience, which is, many years, is that the only way we get people to be on the committees, I mean, definitely to run the committees, but to even be on the committees, is they have to be specifically requested.
Mm.
We have not been very successful sending out, email blasts or putting a comment in our publication saying, we'd love you to join a committee. Here's the application. We really find that the chairs and the co-chairs have to reach out and we have to assist them to reach out and invite people to join them, and that's worked real well for us. We have 150 some odd volunteers, so that's worked
Yeah.
well. But I don't see any growth or reduction. I think everybody's in this quarantine quasi, mood right now, and there's more important things than their CAI chapter committees.
Yeah. I don't know about you guys, but I was just talking to an executive director and my thought is everybody's like, oh, I just want 2020 to get over and let me just make it through. And I'm kind of hopeful for 2021 that people be like, okay, let's just throw that year away because it was complete garbage and start over with a more positive attitude. I don't know if anybody else is feeling that way or hopeful in that way.
For anybody that doesn't feel that way, that's the question.
Well, we're treading cautiously here at 55 and over, very vulnerable community. Our expectations are probably, well, at least through the end of Q2, we're hoping to maybe move into some normality, if I want to use that word, Q3. But our long range focus, we had a cafe that we leased out and they shut down, and I'm not looking to reinvent that till January 1 of 2022. So, some things are a little further out, but fortunately, the environment I'm in, the members' expectations are okay with that being a safer harbour for them. So from where I sit, we're more on the extended calendar of, end of Q2 of 21, hopefully maybe starting to ramp up Q3. Be nice to be fully ramped up Q4. But if it's not Q1 until 2022, it is what it is, and we just have to be okay with it.
Yeah, I agree with Ian. I hate to be the pessimist here, but flu season doesn't peak until mid-February.
I know.
Is as good as it's going to be, it's going to get worse from here.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm of the opinion, I get that CAI, lets the regions make their decisions based on regional conditions, but I think any chapters out of their mind doing an in-person indoor between now and mid-February. We're not looking to do anything indoor in person until Q3.
Crystal, can I make a comment? I'm even nervous about our national conference in May in Vegas with this second wave that we know is going to come after the holidays, because unfortunately there's just too many people out there that are probably, in my mind, still in denial and don't do the right things by others. That's what's going on. I'm a little, and even for myself, working in this high risk environment, if I do come out to Vegas, which I would love to do, I'll have to come back and self quarantine for 7 days and make a rapid test. I mean, that's just a platform I've set. That's just a platform I've set with my staff, and that's okay. I mean, I'll gladly do that. But from an industry standpoint, I'm nervous and concerned about even the national being pulled off in May.
Sure. Let me go back to Nick real quick. I totally get and support what you're saying about the in-person events. I would definitely not participate in an in-person event myself. But different parts of the country think differently. And, unfortunately, if I were to come down in certain parts of the country and say, you can't do this, they're going to say, well, our competition is doing this, other people are doing this, because that's just the way it is in different parts of the country. So, we've, given all of the chapters different resources for virtual and whatnot, but, the ones that we do know are having them in person are following safety protocols. But you don't know, it's definitely would not be my first choice. And as far as
I respect that opinion. I think you guys are getting it wrong on that one. I think the risk reward is not there.
yeah, no, I get that. I get that.
If I were, Tom Skiba and the board, I would be giving guidance out there to say, everybody just don't until March.
Well, I appreciate that. Ian, as far as conference goes, I know that's on everybody's mind as well. We have not made any, decisions on that. I do think if we do move forward with that, it will likely be a smaller event, and there's definitely a lot of discussion about having virtual components to that. I know as far as the chapter team, which is, what we're most involved in, our staff is already talking about having, we will most definitely have some portions virtual, and we will not require anybody to travel if something is held, because we certainly understand the risks and also the costs involved in that for some chapters.
Well, especially with your educational classes, I mean, somewhat, if I want to use the word easy, and nothing's easy in these times, not anything's easy in these times, but the educational component is just as important as the networking and the vendors and the trade show or the exposition part of it. But you'll figure it out. Whatever you do, I'll be there to support it. I'm lucky in that I'm close to Vegas, so if you said I could only come in for one day because you're at 50% occupancy, I would be good with that,
Yep.
But then I'm not traveling from the East Coast, so you guys will figure it out.
Yep, we will, and as soon as we do, we will. The chapters will be on the top of that list to know. Yeah. Hey, Mike Crew, Emily said that you had something you wanted to chat about. Hope you're on mute.
Yeah, I muted when my phone started ringing. Sorry about that. Yesterday at our board meeting, the CED mentioned that National was going to enact a policy about audits for the chapter.
Venn diagrams are perfect for explaining.
Ooh.
That was me. Pardon me.
No problem. Are we going to discuss that any?
We discussed it with the CEDs. We can certainly discuss it here as well. So for our recertification requirements, which are minimum requirements that the chapters complete each year, the presidents do sign off on that as well. We added a requirement that will, oh gosh, I don't have the dates right in front of me. Somebody else help me out here. As it go into effect
2024, I think we have to do it. 2024, we have to do
2023, it's due, I believe.
2023.
2023.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. To have an audit if you're over a certain revenue amount, which Georgia would be.
We would be.
Yeah. So, and it's to have it every 3 years. We wanted to make sure that we had a good, solid checkpoint to make sure that chapters are being audited and have good financial controls in place. That is a new requirement.
Okay. And is it National's intention that it would be a full-blown audit? Or, I mean, are we talking about $5,000-8,000 kind of audit? Or are we talking about it?
Yes, it is.
What is the threshold for having to file those?
Gosh, I don't. Can one of you pull that up, Kelly or Emily or Karen?
I'm posting in the chat right now.
It's
Okay.
100,000.
It's 100,000.
100 over 100,000. And it would be every 3 years. And our intent with every 3 years is, yes, we do understand it's an expense, and it's not necessarily. The audit's usually based on the size. So, the larger chapter, it'll be the larger amount. Many of our larger chapters are already doing regular audits. But if you do it every 3 years, our thought was, putting aside a little bit of money each year to accommodate that. It's an important thing. We have you know, every organization has had situations, you know, with financial improprieties, and we just want to make sure that our chapters are being safe with their members' money, and that's the best way to ensure that.
Well, thank you for the clarification, because the description that I got in the board meeting was not exactly that.
Okay.
So, because honest to God, most of the discussion in my board meeting was about what are the small chapters going to do. I mean, we
Oh,
were
okay.
like looking at Alabama and going, they can't afford to do an audit.
No,
They can
no,
barely afford
no.
to have a lunch.
Yeah, less than 100,000 is just a financial
Yeah,
review.
okay.
You know, over 100,000 an audit. So,
Okay,
Steve,
all right.
did
Well,
you
that
have a
makes a lot more
question?
sense.
Yeah, I just had a question. If we have CPAs that are part of the board, they cannot do this audit, right? This has got to be somebody completely unrelated.
I would say it should not. We didn't make that requirement, but as a best practice, I would say it should not be somebody who is actively sitting on your board. I do not have an issue if it's somebody that is in your membership doing the audit, but not somebody who's in a leadership role. It should be somebody, though, that does specialize in nonprofit accounting. I know a lot of our CPAs that do homeowners associations would be qualified to do that for other nonprofit corporations.
As an example, Vishnu, who's no longer on the board, you know, it's something he wants to do, then
Correct.
let the board make the decision whether.
Yes, but Andrew should not,
Correct.
because he's in a leadership role, so he should not be doing it.
So, Crystal, the Atlanta chapter has its books done by a CPA. We pay a CPA firm to do our books. Our treasurer doesn't do them.
Yeah.
Do you think National would accept I don't know what the right term is, because, you know, auditors have specific language they use to describe the different kinds of letters they issue.
Yeah.
But do you think that the CPA firm that does our books, that they could just issue a letter that says that we're complying? I mean, it seems kind of silly to have a CPA firm audit a CPA firm.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly talk about that. I don't want to get in the specifics there, but, you know, I mean, I'm not a CPA, so I want to make sure that, you know, we're meeting that requirement.
One of the reasons I was thinking about that was because, I mean, the larger chapter, I don't know who's doing the books at the larger chapters, but we, as I said, we pay a CPA firm, and I'm just kind of thinking that sort of offsets the cost of the audit. I mean, if you weren't paying a CPA firm now and you're going to have to pay for an audit, maybe you would just hire a CPA firm right from the get-go.
Yeah, but the
get
CPA
much better books anyway.
You do get much better books. I agree, and that actually would probably reduce your cost of an audit. I mean, you want to check your bookkeeper too, right? So, you know, I mean, it checks those things in place as well. So we would have to definitely talk a little bit more specifically about what the plan would be. But it's a good financial practice, and you know, we're you know, wanted to make sure we gave enough lead time, so it wasn't like you have to do this tomorrow and spend thousands of dollars. So. But we believe it's you know, a strong habit, and the board supports that as well.
I didn't mean to mislead you. I don't think there was a lot of dissatisfaction among our group. You know, that wasn't like, oh no, we shouldn't be doing that. It was just a case, like I said, most of our discussion was about what was the small chapters going to do.
That's so nice of you guys to think about the smaller chapters.
Well, you know, a lot of us remember board meetings that were held at the public library and we brought our lunch in a brown bag.
Yep.
It wasn't that many years ago.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And we did take that into account. We really, you know, tried to make it so that it wasn't a, you know, financial hindrance. And that's why we also said, you know, every 3 years. So we had it at, you know, at least a point in time to check that. I would also say, as a good practice for anyone who, you know, if you're changing CEDs, if, you know, somebody leaves or retires or whatnot, at that point is also a good time to do an audit, because you want to make sure that the person coming in is starting from a clean point in time. So I don't know if that affects anybody here moving forward, but that's something to keep in mind as well. That would just be a best practice, and you don't have to do this at any specific time. We're not saying it has to be done in 2023, 2026, you know. it can be done in whatever time during that 3-year period. So if you happen to be in that situation where you're switching CEDs, that's a good point to do it.
You should also look at your state requirements too, though, because your state could require something specific. So I would recommend you check that out too.
I did a couple of things I wanted. I'm glad Mike Crew brought up the recertification and the audit requirement. While that's not part of our requirement for this year, it's just we announced it so you can be prepared. The recertification is due at the end of January. And so your executive director is probably preparing those administrative documents for you to sign off on. So again, they're minimum requirements. Most chapters, I'm not concerned really about anybody on this call meeting those requirements. But if you do have questions about anything, feel free to reach out to us. Another deadline that's coming up February 12th is for chapter awards. We do chapter achievement awards annually based on different categories. And this year, you know, there's been so many innovative and different programs that we really encourage you to think about things that you did really awesome and encourage you to apply. We really think we're going to see some, well, we've already seen some great things, but we want to reward you for that and give you some recognition. So please think about applying for those awards as well. And I think, Emily, that's been in the chapter leader connection that we send out via email.
Yes.
And Kelly has posted information, a link to the information for the chapter awards as well. Oh, and Emily's reminding me that in addition to those chapter achievement awards, we do give out a chapter executive director of the year award and chapter executive director rising star awards. And so if you feel that your executive director has been, you know, amazing and deserves that recognition, one thing to keep in mind is we think all of our executive directors are amazing and do a great job for your chapters. We do take into account, you know, working with across chapter lines and with the national organization as well. So I'm just throwing that out there. So when you send in a essay on that person, that you include any other participation outside of just being awesome. And those are due January 31st. So, and I know Emily's going to send other reminders on that as well, but I figured while I had you on the call, I'd mention that to you. For those of you who are continuing as your term as chapter president isn't up, or you're officially just starting your term as chapter president, we're going to continue these calls. I haven't scheduled them on your calendar yet because we wanted to see what would be the best day for everybody. We're going to be sending out a survey to everybody, but we figured while we have you on the call today, we're going to throw it up in the chat. So, you know, if you want to go ahead and take that now, you can. Basically, we're just asking you what day, what time works best for you, so we can get the most participation out of those calls. We're also asking you to confirm who your president will be in 2021 and if you've elected that person for 2022. So we can start gathering that data, because your president-elect for 2022, we will start engaging with them in the next couple of months as well. Any other topics anybody has their heart set on talking about today? Ed.
Hi, Crystal. I
Hi,
missed
Ed.
the first couple minutes. I'm sorry for that.
Not a problem.
I wondered if you were talking about the issues of resumption of activities during the coming year.
No, we really didn't. I mean, we talked a little bit about how every area is a little bit different, that, you know, there's many of us on this call that are hesitant or, you know, would not recommend in person for the next several months. Most chapters, and other chapter staff help me out here, I think most chapters are not planning to do any in person until at least after the first quarter, if not the first half of the year, is what I've mostly heard. We do have a couple of chapters that I'm aware of that that are holding in-person events. You know, hopefully, from what we know, in a very safe way outside, have been most of the in-person events that we're aware of. But that's really the only discussion we had on that.
Personally, I'm just cheering Santa Claus on to load his sleigh with vaccines
Totally.
and visit everybody. And so I'm, again, pushing next year. I've been pushing at our strategic planning session to include the component for in-person events. And again, we can pivot off of that if need be. In Michigan, we have legislation that was enacted that protects you from COVID-related claims if you observe the guidelines, CDC guidelines, and that sort of thing. So there's a bit of a safety net in play there, but we have an ongoing discussion in this office about what approach to take regarding next year. And I'm saying, let's lead, let's get out in front of this and plan as much as we can to get out there in person next year. I agree with you. We recognize here that I think the first quarter of the year is not realistic to plan any kind of in person. But we were talking about the possibility of getting together in person at an outdoor venue in May. We talked about it at the strategic planning section. I thought I got shot down there, but I guess I didn't. So, because that's on our agenda for planning for next year. So, I know a big part of what we're doing is marshaling all the resources to make the remote gatherings as good and meaningful as they can be. But I continue to push everyone here to say, when it comes to planning, plan out next year as though in-person meetings will be a possibility. So we get people thinking that way. Maybe just help them get through the darn holidays this year, because a lot of people are really just bummed out with what we've been through. And it's like, wow, this is really, thrown a big monkey wrench into our holiday plans this year.
Yeah,
But
I would just, if any of you that are planning in person, whenever that may be, is make sure you have a plan B and maybe even a plan C if you have to quickly move because of government regulations, or just people are still concerned about coming out or whatnot. I think it's great to have a plan to be back in person. That's where we all would love to be, but we want to make sure that it's as safe as possible. And if we have to move quickly to a different way, you want to be able to do that.
I take encouragement from what happened with our golf outing this year, because we were in the thick of it and people they came out to golf. So
yeah, outside definitely makes a difference. I think people are much more open to an outside venue than indoor.
So we canceled our December golf outing in California because we're not even allowed to get together as a group and play golf in California. As far as having a meeting or having a group, you can play individually, but not as a group. So we canceled it. We're going to try to have 2 next year, but it was terrible. We canceled it 2 days before we were supposed to have it, after all the planning was done, and mainly the venue was the one that's told us we needed to do it.
Yeah, California's regulations, as you know, are very, very strict.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised.
I'm surprised we can do Zooms.
They kicked the 49ers out there to play their games in Arizona.
Well, I know probably even with Zoom, you had to have legislation to allow that too in some cases. So
We had a fortunately we had a good golf event, and yeah, people were very happy that we had the event. They were aching for some social get together. We were only max at 120 people, but they all came out. The business partners came out, sponsors, they came out in full form. We just had it at the end of October. And we have had to move golf events before, a day, 2 days before, because of a hurricane, not because of COVID.
right.
But so I can relate to that. That sucks. But this year was pretty good.
Yeah, Georgia did the same thing. Our golf event was in October, and it typically generates about between $50,000 and $60,000 in revenue, profit revenue for us over costs. And we cut the attendance in half. We cut the fees for all of the whole sponsors back, and we cut the attendance in half, and just made a little tiny bit of money. So our objective was to have the event and break even, and we managed to do that. We cleared $5,000. So
It's good.
so that was very successful because people loved it. It was all outdoors. The food was out. Everything was outdoors, and
Yeah.
And people hung out afterwards. Like there were some tents on the holes, and they would just hang out and socialize for another hour and a half.
Yeah.
After
People really liked it. Our golf committee did an excellent job. Got the committee award actually. So.
We just did the same thing down here. We went from 180 to 60 and modified, and no gatherings for breakfast, no gatherings afterwards. And I think we were budgeted for a profit of maybe 30 grand. And I think we ended up 2 to the good, but all the, half the vendors that were on the tee boxes, they cut back their personnel, and it was good to get out and, see people live.
Yeah.
Even though it was a very scaled down, protected environment.
What chapter are you with, Ian?
Beg your pardon?
What chapter are you with?
Arizona.
Arizona. Thank you.
Yeah, I think even though golf outings tend to be a big money maker, I think what's more important right now is that engagement. And it's great if you make a little bit of money, but that's going to keep people engaged so they come back next year. As we've talked about before, nobody's making money this year. We're all just kind of scraping by. But if we keep people engaged, then they'll come back, and we'll come back even stronger in the future.
And I think that's the way we have to look at it, Crystal. We're in what I'm going to call, survival mode. It isn't about making the money. It's about sustaining the longevity of this pandemic, and it will too pass, and we'll all come out of it on the other side. But we have to be here to pass through it so that we will come out on the other side. So I refer, and I do the same thing with my staff and community here at Trilogy, where we're treading water and in survival mode so we can turn the turbos on and get back into full swing. The vaccine will come out down the road. We'll navigate through that. The herd immunity will take care of some of that. And there'll be a point where we'll get back to, some high degree of normality. I don't think it'll ever be the same again. Things will change, like 9/11 changed the way we travel. This will change the way we cough at the cash register at a supermarket.
Yep, absolutely.
I want to plan my next golf event in April. I'm going to have a get your free vaccine.
That's your sponsorship.
Yeah, I'm going to have play golf at the same time. So
hey, that's awesome.
but I think Ian's exactly right. I mean, there's always been risks in our society. I mean, there's always been diseases out there. There's always been stuff, and we've lived with it. And when we get enough people vaccinated and enough herd immunity, that the spread is not like a raging forest fire, but more like like measles or something. I mean, people do get it. Then things will be normal again. But there'll be those changes, those 9/11 kinds of changes about the way we do things.
We just take let's take the good changes and hang on to them. Like I know, you know, those of you in management and maybe even in other professions, not having to travel to all your night meetings and stuff and being able
Yep.
to do them on video is great. It's saving time and money, and you're getting higher engagement. Even us with in chapter relations, we, you know, hadn't even thought about having this kind of conversation with all of you, and we're doing it monthly and getting a good group of people together to talk. So you know, taking those good things and continuing them is going to be super important.
I am hopeful that we will never go back to night meetings for boards.
I hope so too. Wouldn't that be
And
great?
we've convinced quite a few of them that they can have their board meeting during the daytime now.
Yeah.
Big, I mean, we don't want it. We couldn't get them to do it before. And now they're going, oh, it works. And it's like, well, yeah, we told you that 10 years ago.
You have to be careful about that, because they'll hit you up on Saturday. And do
So-
Saturday.
Oh,
But
Saturday's
you know
worse
what?
than night.
As terrible as that sounds, there's probably a lot of managers that would trade an hour on a Saturday for not going to a meeting at 7 or 8 o'clock at night on Tuesday and Wednesday. I mean, there's probably ones that would be willing to do that, because they're pretty much working on the weekend anyway now. So
Well, absolutely. When you take out the travel time and all the other BS that goes with it from a productivity standpoint, I mean, when we have a look at the pandemic has forced technology to get off their backsides and elevate some things that were going to come down the road, but we're now dealing with it in 2020, where it might not have come to fruition until 2025. So, you know, I think that's a good thing. I mean, I have a couple staff. We have a gal on an iPad that is working from home. She's pregnant, and she's sitting on a little desk on her iPad in the office and talking to us and interacting with us, but she's not physically here, and it's working fantastic.
I know that it forced me to buy notebook computers for every one of my staff members. And I never would have spent that money without this. And it's working great now. It is working great.
That's great. Speaking of staff, I do want to talk about staff just for a minute here. We've talked about them on and off during these calls, and as we've done strategic planning and other sessions, some chapters have talked about evaluations of their executive directors. And just by a quick raise of hands, who does an annual evaluation of their executive director?
I think we've done it every 2 years.
Every 2 years? Okay. 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 Do you use like a formal process? Do you set goals with them? Let's talk about a little bit for those of you who maybe haven't always done that, to get some ideas, because I think it's a really good practice. Ed, did you want to comment, or is that your hand raised from my original question?
Both.
Both. Okay, go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, we just started doing, you know, more rigorous CED evaluation last year. And, you know, so we applied some thought to what the process should look like, what the evaluation should take into account. So we're kind of new at it, but it just goes hand in hand with things like strategic planning. You know, all those things fit together on the edges if they're done right. And so if you have a good strategic plan in place, that's going to have all the road signs, a lot of road signs for your CED to be able to gauge whether, you know, how effective is their job and that sort of thing. So again, we're pretty much new at it. I know last year we had to put some thought into, well, what should this look like? What should the process be? So we took the first step, and now we'll take the second step and revise and improve.
Does anybody who's been at it maybe a little longer than Ed's chapter in Michigan want to share?
I know we have a standard form that we use that highlights a couple different categories as far as, you know, involvement in membership growth, involvement in sponsorship opportunity. You know, how did the expos go this year? You know, just kind of grades the I can't think exactly how that form looks in my head, but I remember those are the items that we covered on it. But I can get one and send it out if you guys want.
Yeah,
Emily
I'd love to
just
get it. Yes, thank you.
Emily just put in the chat, we have a link to our toolkit. You do have to sign into the website to get to that. That does have some samples there. If anybody feels they have a sample that would be good to add to that, I think it's always good to have some options for people. But that's another great practice to get into if you're not already doing it. But a lot of times when people think of evaluations, they think of, merit increases at the same time. And while, any executive director would be thrilled to get a merit increase, it doesn't always have to be that way. I know some chapters I feel like might be a little hesitant this year in their evaluation process because maybe you can't give what you would normally give, but it's still a good idea to set, this is how we did this year and this is how you impacted it, and here's our goals for next year for you as a staff person. So I think it's a good practice to have.
Well, Crystal, as you know, down here in Arizona, we've been following the CAVA policy governance model for a number of years, and the goals, ends, and means platform. It has a strong, executive director evaluation. So,
yeah,
that platform's already written into the type of model of governance we use.
Absolutely.
So we have I guess I would say we have a two-piece evaluation. We give the CED specific goals each year, and they're things like we have these medal sponsors. They pay a pretty significant sponsorship fee. So they have an objective of like increase the top level by 2, increase the second level by 2, increase the third level by 1. So those are easy to measure, and they're tied to a percentage bonus, those kinds of objectives. There's one for sponsorships and there's one for membership, and there's one for profitability of the chapter, whether we finish in the black or the red at the end of the year. And so we do that really well. The part we don't do really well is the part about evaluating people skills, written skills, the kinds of stuff you think about. I mean, when I used to actually get evaluated, which has been a lot of years ago, there was always the piece about what you delivered and then the piece about how you went about it. Okay? And we're not good at the how you went about it part. And I think that's probably a challenge for any volunteer group to sit around and discuss somebody's performance and come to a consensus about how their interactions went and interactions with chapter members and all that stuff. I just think that's a big challenge. Plus, you've got the struggle of the president sits down with the CED and has this review, and some presidents are just not going to be comfortable doing that.
Absolutely.
That's a tough thing to do. It's a very
yeah, and I think it should be more than the president. I would say at least the president and president-elect, because you don't, I mean, heaven forbid it's a contentious situation. I hope that happens from time to time. You don't want it to be a he said she said type situation. So I mean, I think it's good to have more than one person involved in that, whether it's a delivery of something positive or perhaps some challenges. So but yeah, it's not easy, especially if in your day job that's not something that you do.
Right.
It's as volunteers, that's not always something that that you might do in your professional side.
And it's even a little bit of a struggle to get 11 we have 11 board members, so it's even a little bit of struggle to get them all to agree on the same soft points.
Right.
The tangible things are easy to measure. It's the soft skill, people skill stuff that's a challenge to get everybody to agree to. So
sure.
I don't know if this would work for you guys, but it worked for me in a previous position, is self-evaluations from the executive director too. Sometimes those, I mean, it could make the discussion, easier or more difficult, but I always was a fan of that as well, because you could kind of gauge where they're at, and how they feel like they're, performing in the role. So you could even do a self-evaluation and evaluate them as well. Just a suggestion.
You know, Emily, I like that, and I do it in my own company, but sometimes that goes off the rails.
Yeah, it does.
We asked a manager yesterday how much of a raise she thought she should get, and when the number she gave us
50%.
was twice what we budgeted, we were like, shouldn't have asked.
Yep.
But you know where she is though, right? You know.
Oh, we know where her head is. Yes, exactly. So,
Yeah, I always liked the self-evaluation too, you know, to be able to, you know, kind of look at, you know, take a look at myself and see where I am. But whichever way you do it, I think it's just a good practice for not only the individual staff person, but also for the board, just to see if you're aligned with, you know, your strategic plan, your budget, all of those other tools that you use throughout the year.
And Crystal, can I add, sometimes it's
Sure.
helpful if you do quarterly kind of sit downs with the CED to check in, you know, how are the goals coming along? Are there things that they need more that the board needs? And that way, when the time comes for that annual review, it might be a bit easier then to have those conversations about the soft skills, because, you know, you've been kind of working them throughout the year. It's just a suggestion, but that may be helpful too, so that no one is surprised when it comes time for review time. That's just a suggestion.
Yeah, we've all had those situations where you're like, where is this coming from? Nobody's
Right.
ever talked to me about this before.
Right.
And you don't want, that's
Right.
the last place you want to be,
Right.
you know? Okay.
I think it's, Crystal, I think it's harder now too, because you're doing it all on Zoom
Yeah.
and you don't get that, you know, you can't pat them on the back and shake the hand and look them in the eye. You know, it's not easy doing that kind of thing on Zoom, I think.
Yeah. Well, and even some of your executive directors may, you know, this year might even be, you know, hey, we'd love to give you an evaluation. We really feel we'd love to do it in person. And so, you know, perhaps we wait until after the first quarter or something like that, you know, or maybe it's, you know, having you know, if you're in a place where you could have an outdoor, you know, coffee or something like that, you know, maybe you do that. Okay. Any other final thoughts from people as we end 2020 besides good riddance?
Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays. Thank
good
you.
riddance only applies to the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
not
No,
each
that was
other.
not meant for people. Absolutely not. It's meant for the year. No, I truly, like I said in the beginning, this has been, you know, something I wish we had started doing prior to COVID. I think it's been so meaningful to be able to get to know each of you during your leadership years. And, you know, it's something that we plan to continue. And it's just been remarkable to hear how people are handling different things. And even today, Steve on the strategic planning call with his board, he mentioned a couple of different ideas that he got from this group. So I hope you all are getting those ideas and passing them along as well. As I told them, we don't steal ideas from each other, we borrow, and it's the greatest form of flattery when you borrow from somebody. So I think it's a great way to do it, and I've enjoyed it, and I thank you again for those of you who are finishing your terms for your leadership, and I'm sure you won't go very far. We'll see each other again at an event in the future. So so with that, I'm going to close out for today and wish you all happy holidays, and please do stay in touch. And for those of you who are continuing, we'll be setting up calls in the next couple of weeks to start again in January. Please do fill out the survey that's in the chat. If you haven't had a chance to do that, we will be sending that out via email as well. So
Bye-bye.
You,
Okay.
Crystal, and it's good to see faces now. I know when I run into you at national conference who you are.
There you
Yeah.
go.
That's another advantage of doing this Zoom call.
Absolutely. You're like, I know those people. Those people can help.
On a call somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Well, again, thank you, everybody, and we will
Thank
talk
you.
to you very soon. Take care.
Bye.